Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foiled Fox, and I am back on Paper Tray Inks and Ink to Paper Collection YouTube channel, and I am showcasing Floral Breeze. And here it is. It has this wonderful branch, and then it has another little kind of trunk, and then some lots of flowers and leaves, and then a matching die set, of course. And there's one other piece that's an accessory. It's actually Floral Breeze accessory die, and it cuts out this sentiment and this little swing and some grass area, which we'll use all three of these pieces. So you'll see those a little bit later on. But right now I have three pieces of white cardstock, and this is 110 pound. It's 7 by 4 3/4, 6 by 4 3/4, and 5.5 by 4 3/4. You can see I have those pasted on my, those dimensions are pasted on my glass mat there so that you can write them down. And now I'm going to take the big piece, this is the 7-inch, and I'm coloring it, just creating a little grass area, and I'm using green parakeet, new leaf, and pine feather. You know that if you've watched videos of mine in the past, that I like to combine inks, and so I'm just combining these colors. And for the really dark colors, so that it doesn't really grab, I first rub it off onto the glass mat before I put it onto paper, so there isn't a little blotchiness. And then I've told you before, there was that little grass die. I cut a little grass there, and I'll show you why. We're going to use the grass area, and so I'm going to color that really quickly using these same colors. Looks like a real mess when you just, I always leave it in its negative space. It's so much easier to color because then you're not holding on to little tiny pieces. Then I'm going to take this negative area, and I'm going to use it as a stencil, and I'm just going to stencil on some of the grassy area. And hang on to this stencil, because this little baby stencil, because we're going to use it again a little bit later. And just blend that out. Now I'm taking a cloud stencil, and you can use any cloud stencil that you have, and I'm starting with Blueberry Sky, and I'm just going to, and then as I work up to higher up on the sky, I'm going to change to Tropical Teal. But I'm just going to make this whole area sky because we're creating a background. And like I say, you can use any cloud stencil that you have. This is just an older one that I have, but I like the cloud formations that it creates, so I use this one a lot. I know there's a lot out there in the market right now, and you probably have one in your stash. If you don't, you can always check that out on foiledfox.com, and we have them there. Now I'm taking take any rectangle die. I'm using Hero Arts Infinity dies, but I'm going to take one that just cuts a little a nice window out of these two pieces, and it has the top and the bottom is a little bit larger than the sides. And particularly on that 5.5, that 5.5, you see it got a little slim there. I could have made it a little bit bigger. I could have gone at 5 3/4, and maybe that would have been better for the total width, but we're sticking with 5.5 for now, and it's going to work out just fine. But those sides are a little slimmer than 1 1/4. So I'm going to do the same thing as we did with the background, and I'm going to create the grassy area, do it the same way using these three colors, blending them on. And then I'm also going to take that little stencil, and you know, it's subtle, but it does make a difference. You do see that little grassy area. The nice suggestion of it is I think really important when you're creating a scene. You want to just kind of suggest what you're doing, what you're trying to communicate. And then I'm going to take the cloud die again and use the same colors of blue, and we're going to just put clouds working our way up the sides and on the top. And again, starting with Blueberry Sky, And then as we get more to the top, I'm going to change to tropical teal. It's just these little tiny areas, so there's not many clouds there to put on there. There's just a bit, and it's just, again, we're just looking for a suggestion and to make a real cohesive scene. With all of those done now, we're going to score these. So I'm taking a scoreboard and I'm scoring 1/4 inch on each side. This is on the 6 inch piece. So 1/4 inch on that piece. And I'm going to fold that over. Make sure we get a nice fold there. And then I'm going to take the background, which is 7 inches across. I'm going to score at 1/4 inch. Then I'm going to score 3/4 of an inch from the edge, so 1/4 inch, and then 3/4 inch from the edge. So they have to both be equal. Both of these sides need to be equal. Now that when I scored 1/4 inch and then another 1/2 inch, which gives you 3/4 inch from the edge, that means that we're going to have a 1/2 inch thickness. If you wanted it to be thicker, then you could go 3/4. That works out fine too. Or I don't suggest going any slimmer than a 1/2 inch, and you'll see why. So that we're creating this little box that's going to create this shadow, this pop-up shadow card. The shadow box card that pops up, lays flat when it goes in an envelope, but then pops up. So you can see how they fit in together, and they're all, you want to make sure each of these, when folded, are 5.5 on from the width going across. Now, as I mentioned to you, that 1/4 inch is just a little bit bigger than the border that's going to be on the front. So I don't want that to show through from the front. So I just trimmed it off just a little bit so it fits. You can see now that it fits really well. Now we're able to go on to, I'm going to set that aside, and we're going to stamp the flowers and the branches. But I'm stamping some flowers here, and I always make more than I need. You probably know this if you've followed videos from me in the past, but that's just so that I don't run out and I have them when I at the ready. But I stamped it with Sweet Blush, and now the layering stamp on top, I'm stamping with Berry Sorbet. And you can just turn that until they get to the right orientation. I never know with these kinds of projects how many I'm going to use, so I do like to have an abundance of them. Now the centers, I'm going to, there's lots of centers in this stamp set, and I'm going to stamp them with Honey Nut, which is kind of a yellowy brown color, and it's great for this, but I wanted it a little bit brighter in the center, so I'm using a Copic marker Y38 just to brighten up those centers just a little bit. With that done, I'm going to now stamp the branch, and there's a little skinny little tree trunk that doesn't really have much branches that I'm going to also stamp at the same time. So I'm putting, first I applied Honey Nut and then a little bit of cocoa bean, and now for the dark, really dark shadowy areas, I'm using dark chocolate. And you know, that's exactly how I, you know, if you've watched, you know that I like to combine these colors, and I think it looks more natural is why I do that. And it gives it more interest. Then there's this little ground piece, so I'm using the same colors, the Honey Nut and the cocoa bean. And now I'm going to trim that out because we'll use that later. And I'm going to cut off that little trunk right there. But before I cut it completely out, I'm going to use a few Copic markers. I'm going to use E21 and E23 and just color those in. And then I'm going to fussy cut these. There is not a die for this. And this little skinny trunk, I only need one of them. So with this almost all cut out, I'm going to move on to the big branch there that does have its own die. I actually stamped and cut out 3 of them. I didn't want to bore you with that. And then of course there's the flowers that I'm cutting out. And then I off camera stamped the little green leaves, and I'm going to cut those out as well. Now I'm going to move on to the accessory die, where I can cut out the sentiment and I can cut out the swing. I cut out 2 of the swing because I thought that maybe it needed a little more strength, and I was right about that because they're very thin. And I'm coloring, you can color these with ink, but I'm coloring them with Copic markers, and I'm using BG32, BG45, and BG18. And you can use any color that you want, whatever you want to accent, but I kind of like the blues in this. And then I'm going to take a little bit of, I'm going to put those together here shortly. But first, let's color this little bit this sentiment actually that is in part of this accessory. It doesn't look like much. You probably can't see a lot of detail, but it has flowers. And then in the center, it says you're in my thoughts. And I thought this would make a really nice sentiment for this shadow box pop-up card. And I'm just coloring these with Copic markers. Again, I use these because I think I have a little better control, but you can use ink, you can use anything you'd like. The colors I'm using, if you use Copic markers for the flowers, I'm using R20, R32, R29, and then for the greens, I'm using the YG03 and the G03. I'm just going to color those. I'm just kind of scribbling those on. Now for the sentiment, which is right in the center. I'm coloring it with R20, all of it. And then I'm going to make it kind of ombre. So I'm coloring the bottom half of each of those lines of words with R32. And then I'll go over the very, very bottom. So the middle section is the R32 and then the R29. But you know, it's looking so much like the flowers that I wanted a little bit more contrast. And I kind of go back and forth, just kind of getting all those colors blended. But I think I'm going to go on to using a little heavier, darker color. So here I'm using R89, and that, I'm sorry, R39, and that gives a much darker color, and it's one of my favorite colors. It's a nice jewel tone, and I'm just going back over it, just making sure that the R39 is at the bottom, and then giving it kind of that ombre effect just for the words. Doesn't look like much when it's all in is still in its negative space. I recommend you leave it there so that you don't wreck the die before you get a chance to use it, because otherwise it can bend so easily if you don't keep it in its space. Now there's lots of little bits to push out of here, and then it'll reveal itself. See, there it is. So it really now pops out. So it gives a much better, I think, with that darker words. Now I'm putting a little bit of glue on one of those swings, and I'm just going to stack it on top of the second swing and give it a little extra strength, because that is very, very fine. Now we're going to go back to the background, and I'm going to take a piece of double stick tape. Now you can use glue. I just find that I can put this double stick tape on here and it holds really nicely, and it's a little cleaner and not messy. My double stick tape was 1/4 inch wide, and it's a little too wide because you remember we trimmed that a tiny bit. And I'm just putting it on that very edge. So we still have that 1/2 inch kind of sticking up, and then as it curves around, we have to the front, we now are putting a little bit of double stick tape because that's where the front's going to be adhered to. Just trim that back. Might be easier to do it this way, to trim it once it's on the paper. So there we want to make sure that we get that nice and burnished down on both folds. You can see I fold that over. That's what we want it to do. And when it's folded like that, it's 5.5 across. And then now we're going to we're going to add these tree trunks to the back. But first we have to make sure that the tree trunks are centered on the other two pieces too. So let's tack on tree trunks from the top and bottom here, kind of position them there on both of these pieces, the inner, the middle piece, and the top piece. We'll do that too. See, this is the middle piece, and we'll just do the same thing, tack it on the top and the bottom. First, we're going to put a little bit of tape on here. Sorry I didn't do this sooner. I should have, while I was putting double stick tape on, I should have put it on these edges too. This one just has the one fold. That's what goes in the center. But now we're going to put the trunk there. And I'm just going to make sure that they line up with one another. And that's why I'm going to use liquid glue there, so I have a few seconds to position it. And now I'm going to put this on the inside and put that on top, because we know that's how they're going to layer up. So I get an idea to make sure that everything's lining up. And then we're going to put in this last one, and I have glue on the back there. And I'm holding it with a tweezer because there is glue on the back. And and the tweezer really helps me kind of line it up though too. See how I just kind of squeeze them together, and then they just line up really nicely. And then we can make sure that all 3 layers line up. And then we'll be set to go. So now that we know that all 3 of those layers line up, I'm going to add that extra little tree trunk that we made only to the background. You could leave it off if you want to. I just decided I wanted it could just kind of complete the scene. And now I'm just kind of positioning where I think get an eyeball where I want that sentiment. I'm using that beautiful die, that Floral Breeze accessory die, as my sentiment. And I'm just adding a little bit of glue, and we're going to add this to the back. And then we're going to add I'm going to stick on the middle section. So I'm going to, there's that fold right there on the back. And I'm going to line it up with the fold right there. And then I'm going to, so that it just fits right inside there. You want it while, and then you can peel off the tape here and fold that down. So now you see, now you have it in the center. So you line up the edge right with the fold, and you stick it to that side there. And now we're going to pull off the double stick tape, and we're going to add on the top. Now this is a little bit fiddly, but not bad. You just want to make sure that you have it all lined up. And if you've done your measuring right, it's going to line up perfectly. So now you can see it lays down flat, so you can fit in an envelope, and then it pops up for display. And just tack down those little branches right there. And you can see inside there, now you have the middle layer, and then you have the back, and then front. So you have 3 layers. I'm going to take the swing, and I'm going to just trim off a little bit off the top, and then put a little bit of glue. I'm going to use my tweezers. I'm going to put this in the middle because I don't want it all the way out to the front. I want to show a little bit of dimension, but I don't want it stuck to the back either. So I want it to kind of stand away when it sits up in its standing position. So that's in order. Now all it just means that we just do a little decorating with our flowers and our leaves. So this is where it's great to have abundance, because you can just pick through which ones you like and where you want to have it. And I put some in the back, in the very back on the background, on the back panel. Some I put in the middle panel, and some I put in the front panel. I'm just doing that to give it a little bit of dimension. That's the whole idea with this shadow box, is so it shows dimension. And it's a really fun card to give, because it'll fit flat in an envelope, because it can fold to the side, and then it can it pops up and it can actually stand on its own for display. Now we're going to add a few of these adorable leaves. These are so sweet, and I'm going to just stick those wherever I think. You don't need a ton of them, but you can put as much on your tree trunk as you want. This would work great also for fall, if you had fall leaves here. Now I am taking that little brown area. You remember that way back when we had that little area? I'm adding that to making a little ground area. It also gives strength to the front, so I like it for that reason too. And I'm adding that little bit of grass. And then I went ahead and did some other grass pieces off camera, and I'm going to stick those on the middle layer, because again, it just adds a little bit of dimension, and it makes for a really cute display. So we're just going to stick that on there, and see, it folds down flat. We're going to burnish it again, making sure it sticks flat, and we can do it both ways. Usually it folds down better one way than the other, but it should go both ways, and then it'll pop right up, and it can stand up on its own. As you can see, there's the 3 layers, the inside. So you know you've done it right if you have the 3 layers there. See, and it can stand on its own. So here it is, and I just really think that this gives you a really nice display, and how fun it is to send this to someone. I think they would just really love it, and you can decorate your scene any way you'd like. Now here I made an envelope, and I'm just to show you how it fits in very nicely, and then you can move it all those different directions, but it's meant to where it will center and go right to center like that. And there you see how it looks from the top, but it will stand up on its own. It will make a very nice display. I hope you enjoyed this project. I just love pop-up things, and you'll see more in the future. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. We would love that. And just as this is just a few of the things that we use, the Floral Breeze Stamp and Die Set, and the accessory set, and some paper tray inks. You can pop over to the blog, which is blog.inktopaper.com, and there you'll see a more complete supply of supply list, and also you will see some more close-ups. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.